Right, welcome to Six Vessels. I am the True Demon Lord, and in this two-part little video series, I'm going to be talking about Chaos Demons in 10th edition. In part one, we'll be talking about the army faction ability, the detachment rules, the enhancements, and all the stratagems, some little tips and tricks with them. And in part two, we'll go over all the key units and what I think is going to be good for us going forward, both competitively and just casually as well. And again, going over some tips, tricks, and tactics with that. So in this part one video, we're going to start with the faction ability, which is the Shadow Chaos. So a very cool thematic army rule, basically focused on just trying to cover the entire battlefield in the shadow of the warp, as you just control it and engulf it with all your demonic goodness. So your deployment zone is always classed being in the shadow of the warp, which is good. Gives you your little safety zone. Also might deter your opponent from getting too close. And then at the start of any phase, if you control half or more of the objectives in no man's land, it becomes your under your shadow for the rest of that phase. And same with your opponent's deployment zone. If you control half or more of the objectives in your opponent's deployment zone at the beginning of a phase, for the phase, it's under your deployment, it's under your shadow. So it is a phase per phase thing. So you probably won't control it unless you do control half the objectives in no man's land. You won't really control it at the beginning of the movement phase, but you may control it in the shooting phase where you've moved onto those objectives. So what do you actually get for being in the shadows? Well, for your units, you never take a battle shock test while you're within the shadows. No, not wholly within, just partly within. You get +1 to your battle shock test, and if you pass those battle shock tests, you heal D3 wounds unless that unit was a battle shock. Then you can instead return D3 models. So that's a great little ability. If your monsters get down to 10 to 8 wounds, depending on pass battle shock test generally on a 5+ with the +1, just being able to heal those D3 wounds is fantastic. And then your troops, for example, pink horrors is probably where this is the best on, being able to get again normally get enough on a 6 or 5 with a instrument, and then also to be able to just lose pink horrors, turn them to 2 blues, turn them into brimstones, and then return D3 pink horrors back. That's pretty cool. So overall, I think that's a nice little buff. I think battle shock can be a bit of an issue if you start failing them, to be able to get +1, and also to get the buff of being able to heal is really good. And then if your opponent takes battle shots within your Shadow of Chaos, they're actually at -1, which is pretty good. You can control the objectives as your opponent goes into their turn, because that happens at the command phase. At the beginning of their command phase, you would have Shadow, say, in center of the board in no man's land. And so giving them -1 is quite handy. And then any units that fail a battle shock test while within the Shadow of Chaos, they will take D3 mortal wounds. So it's a really good way to just knock off a few extra wounds on units, especially that unit's down to just a couple guys. D3 wounds if they fail, and then rolling 2 mortal wounds on a 2-wound squad. It can really come in handy and can be very annoying for your opponent. I think it's a bit harder in practice to get it off, but in those turns where you swamp the board and just make it too difficult for your opponent to really stop it, you can really get some nice little combos here. And this does go off very well with the actual detachment ability, which is Fort Rifts. So whenever you set one of your units up in the reinforcement steps using the Deep Strike ability, if you land wholly within your army Shadow of Chaos, you can come 6 inches away from your opponent's units rather than 9. So that's really strong. Similar to how we could kind of do it in 9th, a bit different, but the ability to still come in closer is fantastic. It's keeping in with the whole theme of demons being able to just land, from the warp, coming closer, and coming 6 inches away. Very good, especially if the unit has an icon, like a lot of your battle line stuff, or units of blood crushers and plague drones, etc. Getting +1 to charge, so you can actually go in 5 inches or 5-inch charge, which is really, really good. And then let's remember, Be'lakor always makes 6 inches around him on the board, classes being within the shadows, so he can still do kind of what he done in 9th, where you can drop units wholly within 6 of him, 6 inches away from your opponent, which is really good. And there's also a stratagem we're going to go over later, which also turns the board into part of the shadows, so you can really play about with that, but be able to come in 6 inches away. Super, super strong. So the enhancements, unlike a lot of factions, our enhancements are very character based. All four of them specifically hit one character. They're not really buffs for the armies, but I mean, it makes sense with demons. You have a lot of focus on certain characters, and these all, though they can go on smaller characters like your heralds and that, it makes sense going on the big guys, of course. So starting with the Corn enhancement, we've got Argath, the King of Blades, which returns from 9th edition. A bit different though. So the bearer adds 1 to strength and attacks of their melee weapons. If they're within the shadows of chaos, they instead add 2 to the strength of attacks. So there's a bit of a theme here. They've all got a caveat of if you're within the shadow, you get a bit better. I'm really trying to encourage you to really play into those shadows, which is quite nice. And this is great on a Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster with a big axe now has 7 attacks. So just to give him this, just gives him 8 attacks, and then the ability to have 9 attacks. Strength 16 to 17, 18, maybe not the biggest difference. I mean, you can wound toughness 9 on 2s, which is really nice. But yeah, this is fantastic on a Bloodthirster with a big axe. He's still brutal as you would expect. And this just ups his damage and his killing power. The next one is the Everstave, which is the Zinch enhancement. So you add 3 inches to the range of all ranged weapons for the bearer, and +1 to the strength of the ranged weapons as well. If you're within the shadows, instead it ups it to 6-inch range, +6-inch range, and +2 strength. This is great on a Lord of Change. They lost their psychic. They can still put out a fair bit of shooting damage though. With this, a Lord of Change can really put out some hard work. His bolt change becomes 21 inches or 24 in the shadows. And with his +1 to strength buff for Zinch units in the shooting phase, he can get the strength 12 on the bolt, and then obviously having the ability to make it sustain hits D3. You can stand 24 inches away, be 6 inches of Bellacore, and pop. He's Reef the Shades ability where you can't be shot within 18, so you can stand 24 away, hit your units your opponent at 24, and they can't hit you back. So that's really, really good. Also taking the Rod of Sorcery on him. This will buff that a bit as well, making it up to 18 inches, strength 11. So yeah, this is great on a lot of change, making him just a real shooting platform. The end of skiff is the Nurgle one. It's quite cool, 5 for no pain, quite simple. If you're within the shadows, there's 4 for no pain, which is quite funny. So just a toughness 12 grout and clean one with 20 wounds, a 4-up in one, and a 5-up or a 4-up for no pain is a pretty tough lump of plastic that you've got to remove off that board. He's not going anywhere too fast. While I don't think the grout and clean one is amazing, just this big lump with a 4-up in one and a 4-up for no pain and toughness 12 with 20 wounds. Yeah, I mean, he's not going to be easy to remove. There's not many things in the game that can remove that in a turn. So he's great for holding an objective. Just in general, be annoying. Damage output not great, but yeah, you can really make him just so he's quite hard to kill. I do like this on a Nurgle Demon Prince as well on foot, because once per game you can pop 3-up in one in the phase. You can play the reroll 1 strat, which we're going to get to in a minute for invulnerable saves. And then if you're in the shadows for the 4+ for no pain, and obviously the stealth ability that the footprints naturally have, just to make him basically unkillable in a phase. Really good for holding an objective or whatever. So really good. And then Soul Stealer is a Slaneshi one. Each time the bearer destroys an enemy unit with a melee attack, you roll a dice. On 4+, the bearer regains a wound up to a maximum of 6. And if you're within the shadow, you increase the roll by 1. So if you're within the shadows, you're gaining wounds back on a 3, on a 3+. So that's pretty good. Keepers are not too bad. Their damage output is pretty decent to elite or light vehicles. So given it the ages for a 5-up for no pain, sending it into elite infantry, things like Terminators or stuff like that, or even those smaller light vehicles, and just being able to smash them up, and just to heal wounds back on an already a bit of a stubborn unit when it's got that 4-up in one and 5-up for no pain. So I think overall all our enhancements are quite good, not too expensive, all ranging between 15 to 30 points. They buff your big characters. So yeah, that's what you want. And then we're going to go into the stratagems. So we've got corruptible space at the start of a command phase, or start of your command phase. Sorry, you pick one of your units that's on an objective. That unit then corrupts the objective, making it a sticky objective. So until your opponent takes the objective. It's yours, even if you're not on it. And then the area 6 inches around that objective on the battlefield is classed as being within your shadows. So you've got some really cool little tricks here. If you've got, you can use it to bring your units, 6 to 8 inches away from an opponent, and maybe towards the middle or in some certain area. This is really good early on if you have pink horrors who can infiltrate. They start on a far objective, corrupt it turn 1, and then your opponent has to force their way over there. You can block them out, and it just allows you to use your resources elsewhere while not having to worry about holding the objective. So yeah, pretty decent. I like the shadow caveat to it as well. That's quite good. Strata Terror, which I think is a fantastic stratagem. You get +1 AP, use it in shooting or your fight phase in a game where a lot of AP has gone down by 1 point. This is pretty good. And then if you're the target of the attacks is a unit that has been is currently battle shocked, you reroll wounds as well, which is really good. That's fantastic. This Flamers love this. Your monsters love this. Flesh Hounds like this. Blood Crushers love this. Pretty much everything loves this. But I think Flamers definitely can get a lot of use out of this, especially if you can get the +1 strength aura from the Lord of Change. You're back up to strength 5 and -2 as you were back in 9th edition, and reroll wins versus Battle Shock. We have a lot of ways to proc some Battle Shocks as well through different units. So I think that's a fantastic strategy. It's definitely probably going to be one of the most used ones. And then we have Warp Surge, which I think is amazing. So in the charge phase, you use this. You pick a unit that advanced and is currently within your Shadow of Chaos. That unit can still charge. So advance and charge while you're in the shadows. That's something we've been wanting for a very long time. Just the instant unit that comes to mind, Bloodthirster. And again, it's not wholly within your shadows, so you just have to be touching it slightly with the base. You can use Bellicor 6-inch bubble to really do this as well. Bellicor pretty much can always do this because he's always within the shadows. And again, if you can proc that corrupt rule space strat, get around that 6-inch bubble on that objective if you play it smartly and get an advance and charge in certain areas. So yeah, fantastic strategy. Definitely another one's going to be used, if you can get it off. And then we've got Denizens of the Warp. So you pick one of your units that's arriving on the board from Deep Strike. They can come in 3 inches away instead of 9 or 6, depending on the shadows. But it cannot charge. I think this is great. This is a really cool tool to have in your toolbox. Even just if your opponent's on an objective but they're not fully on it, you can drop on the objective 3 inches away and nick it straight away. Which is really, really good and can cause some major issues, especially if you really need to try and get the shadows up in your turn. For example, for Warp Surge, this is a good way to do it. I think this is also great if you need to do actions. Say you've got to do stuff in the quarters of the board and your opponent's blocking at 9. We just pop this, come in, 3 inches away. You can now get into that little gap in the corner and do your action. This is really, really good, really good stratagem. And then we've got Realm of Chaos, so another great stratagem. At the end of your enemy's turn, you remove either one of your units, or you can remove 2 units that are currently within the Shadows of Chaos, and then you bring them back down in your next reinforcement step using the Deep Strike ability. So and this isn't like stopped at turn 2 or turn 3. Like you can do this at turn 4 if you want to come back on turn 5. That's really good. That's an amazing ability to have in the back pocket, especially to get into the back quarters for actions, for being able to just cause your opponent issues elsewhere on the board. And this goes really well with Denizens of the Warp, being able to come back in 3 inches away. Another really cool trick is with Bellicor. Being able to pull Bellicor off the board, and then another unit that's also within the shadows, because Bellicor again is always in the shadows. You keep someone close to him, they're also in the shadows. You drop Bellicor 9 inches away, and then you can drop your next unit within 6 inches of Bellicor and 6 inches away from your opponent. So that's a really cool little trick. And it's again similar to what we could do in 9th with Warp Portal for Bellicor, throw them across the board and then spit units out. Obviously it's a step before, but a great ability to have for both for those kind of tricks for charging and for late game objective play and mission play, secondaries and all that kind of stuff. And then last stratagem is Daemonic Invulnerability. You can only use it in your opponent's shooting phase, but the unit you pick, once it gets targeted, you can reroll invulnerable saving throws of 1. So it being limited to just a shoot phase is a bit hurty. Like, I would like it in the combat phase as well, but I mean, in a very shooty meta and game, I think it's still quite handy to have. And especially on a unit that you really need to keep around. If you need one of your monsters to just sit on that objective, or you really need them to be around so they can throw forward next turn and smash one of your opponent's units, 4 invulnerable saving running 1s can spike. Very handy to have. I think this is also really good on pink horrors. They're already a pain in the butt with the 4-up invuln, and splitting on 4+s to be able to have the ability to reroll the 1s on their 1s, and to maybe stop the unit from being wiped out on 1 in activation, so you can split. So very handy. And all these stratagems are just 1 CP, so very cheap. I don't think we have a single bad stratagem. We definitely have a tier list of them. But I think, yeah, Realm of Chaos, Denizens of Warp Surge, all top 1s. Drought Terror is a great one as well. Corrupt Rule Space is pretty decent, and Demonic and Vulnerability, probably not your most used one, but in those occasions where you really need to keep a unit alive, yeah, it's really, really handy, really good to have. So, and that concludes the enhancements, stratagems, detachment ability, and the army rule. Overall, I think we've got some cool bits. I think all our stratagems are decent. I think our enhancements make our big monsters quite good, or adds to them if they're already good, which most of them are. I think Shadow Chaos, bit finicky to play about with, but you can get it off in those sense where you do get it off. The payoff is quite good. The battle shock manipulation is pretty good. Being able to heal your stuff is fantastic. Being able to hurt your opponent's stuff, obviously good. And coming 6 inches away is really, really good. And again, using Bellacore to the max to be able to take advantage of that, as well as Corrupt Rule Space with the 6-inch bubble around the objective. So loads of ways to play about with it, loads of ways to take full advantage of it. But yeah, that'll do for the first part of this video. So please check out part 2, where I go into all our key units, what I think is going to be good going forward for us, what some of the tips and tricks I think will be quite handy to have. Yeah, and thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in part 2.